The story of Miyamoto Musashi begins not with triumph, but with blood, confusion, and the haunting weight of regret. At 13 years old, he killed his first man in a duel. By 17, he had survived the catastrophic Battle of Sekigahara, one of the bloodiest conflicts in Japanese history, fighting on the losing side. 4 years afterward, he wandered Japan as a masterless samurai, a ronin, carrying the burden of violence and the gnawing question, what was it all for? Yet this same man would eventually become Japan's most celebrated swordsman, winning over 60 duels without defeat, and would author The Book of Five Rings, a text on strategy and philosophy that continues to influence millions across the world centuries after his death. Musashi's transformation from a troubled, regret-laden warrior to an enlightened master reveals profound secrets about personal growth that remain startlingly relevant today. The weight of early regrets. Musashi's early life was marked by chaos and abandonment. His father, a competent martial artist himself, either died when Musashi was young or abandoned him. Historical accounts vary. Raised by an uncle and a priest, young Musashi was reportedly wild, aggressive, and difficult to control. His first duel at 13 against a trained samurai named Arima Kihei ended with Kihei dead and Musashi fleeing the village. This wasn't a moment of glory. It was traumatic violence that would echo through his consciousness for years. By his late teens, Musashi had participated in the Battle of Sekigahara on the side of the Western Army, which suffered a crushing defeat. He watched thousands die, saw the vanity of political machinations, and witnessed firsthand how even skilled warriors could fall meaninglessly in the chaos of battle. He survived by luck as much as skill, and this realization wounded his pride while simultaneously awakening him to a harsh truth. Individual prowess meant little without wisdom. The years that followed were Musashi's period of Musha Shugyo, warrior pilgrimage. He wandered Japan seeking stronger opponents, defeating renowned swordsmen and developing his reputation. Yet despite his victories, he was reportedly unkempt, wild-looking, and tormented. He bathed infrequently, his appearance was frightening, and he seemed driven by something darker than the pursuit of excellence. He was running from his regrets rather than growing from them. This is the first crucial insight into Musashi's growth secrets. He didn't begin as an enlightened master. He started as someone deeply flawed, carrying trauma, driven by ego, and seeking validation through violence. His greatness came not from denying these shadows, but from eventually facing them and transforming their energy into something constructive. The turning point. The Yoshioka School Duels. The duels with the Yoshioka School in Kyoto marked a critical transformation in Musashi's development. The Yoshioka family ran one of the most prestigious sword schools in Japan, and after Musashi defeated the head of the school, the family's honor demanded revenge. What followed was a series of increasingly desperate challenges, culminating in an ambush where Musashi faced dozens of armed men. Historical accounts describe how Musashi arrived early and hid, observing his enemy's preparations. When the young Yoshioka heir arrived with his small army of retainers, Musashi struck with devastating efficiency, killing the heir and cutting through the ambush to escape. The Yoshioka school never recovered its prestige. But something changed in Musashi after this brutal series of encounters. Perhaps it was the realization that he had destroyed an entire martial lineage, or that the cycle of revenge could have ended him, or that he had survived through strategy as much as swordsmanship. Whatever the catalyst, Musashi began to shift from being a skilled killer to becoming a thoughtful strategist. He started to see dueling not as a validation of his ego but as a laboratory for understanding combat, human psychology, and his own weaknesses. He began experimenting with techniques, fighting with two swords simultaneously, a practice that was highly unconventional, and developing his unique style, Nitten Ichi Ryu, two heavens as one school. The alchemy of regret, transforming pain into wisdom. Musashi's growth secrets fundamentally revolved around his ability to metabolize regret into wisdom. Rather than being crushed by his past or becoming defensive about his actions, he developed a systematic approach to learning from every experience, especially painful ones. Secret 1. Radical honesty and self-examination. In The Book of Five Rings, Musashi emphasizes the importance of perceiving things as they truly are, not as we wish them to be. This principle clearly emerged from his own practice of ruthless self-examination. He didn't romanticize his victories or make excuses for his mistakes. He studied them clinically, asking, what worked? What didn't? Where was I lucky? Where did my opponent fail? This practice of radical honesty extended to examining his motivations. Why did he fight? What drove him to seek duel after duel? By middle age, Musashi had recognized that much of his early career was driven by insecurity, anger, and the need to prove himself. This recognition didn't destroy him. It freed him to fight and live with clearer intentions. For modern practitioners of any craft, this principle is revolutionary. We live in an age of personal branding and self-promotion, where admitting weakness feels dangerous. Musashi teaches that genuine strength comes from acknowledging our flaws honestly, studying them without judgment, and systematically addressing them. Secret 2. Strategic discomfort and deliberate challenge. Musashi actively sought discomfort throughout his life. He fought with different weapons, in different conditions, against different styles. He practiced in extreme cold and heat. He deliberately put himself in disadvantageous positions to test his adaptability. This wasn't masochism, it was strategic. Musashi understood that growth occurs at the edge of our capabilities, not in the center of our comfort zone. By regularly pushing into uncertainty, he developed not just technical skills but mental flexibility and emotional resilience. His famous duel with Sasaki Kojiro on Gonryu Island exemplifies this principle. Kojiro was renowned for his technique with a long sword and had never been defeated. Musashi arrived late to the duel, intentionally antagonizing his opponent to disturb his mental equilibrium, and carved a bakken, wooden sword, from an or on the boat ride to the island. He fought one of history's greatest swordsmen with a makeshift weapon, won the duel with a single strike, and walked away without looking back. This wasn't recklessness, it was supreme confidence born from years of deliberately placing himself in challenging situations and learning to adapt. He had trained his mind to remain calm and strategic even when conditions were far from ideal. Secret 3. Integration of multiple disciplines. As Musashi matured, he recognized that mastery in one area was incomplete without understanding others. He studied calligraphy, poetry, painting, sculpture, and philosophy. He didn't approach these as hobbies but as complementary practices that informed his martial development. His paintings, particularly his famous depictions of birds and landscapes, reveal a mind attuned to economy of motion, decisive action, and the space between actions. His calligraphy shows the same principles he applied to swordsmanship: clarity, directness, and perfect timing. This integration served multiple purposes. First, it prevented the narrowing of perspective that comes from obsessive focus on a single domain. Second, it allowed principles discovered in one area to cross-pollinate with others. The patience required for painting informed his strategy in dueling. The decisiveness of swordsmanship enhanced his calligraphic strokes. For contemporary individuals, this principle suggests that true mastery in any field benefits from engagement with seemingly unrelated disciplines. The programmer who studies dance, the businessperson who practices martial arts, the scientist who writes poetry, These combinations aren't dilutions of focus but enrichments that create more robust and creative excellence. Secret 4. Embracing solitude for clarity. After his most famous duels, Musashi increasingly withdrew from society. He spent years in mountain caves and remote temples, meditating, practicing, and refining his understanding. This wasn't escapism but a deliberate practice of removing external noise to hear internal truth more clearly. In solitude, Musashi confronted himself fully. Without the distraction of reputation, rivalry, or social obligation, he could examine his motivations, fears, and desires with complete honesty. The insights gained during these periods of withdrawal informed the crystallization of his philosophy. His final years were spent in a cave called Ryagando, where he wrote the Book of 5 Rings. This masterwork emerged not from the heat of combat but from the cool reflection of a man who had moved beyond ego and could articulate timeless principles of strategy, psychology, and human nature. Modern life offers few opportunities for genuine solitude. We're constantly connected, stimulated, and distracted. Musashi's example suggests that periodic withdrawal, not to escape responsibility but to gain clarity, is essential for deep growth and self-understanding. The 5 Rings, a framework for transformation. The Book of 5 Rings represents Musashi's distilled wisdom, organized into 5 books representing different elements: ground, water, fire, wind, and void. Each offers insights into transforming regret and limitation into strength. The ground book emphasizes fundamentals. Musashi learned that flashy techniques fail under pressure. Only basics, practiced until they become reflexive, provide reliable foundation. His regrets about early duels won through luck rather than systematic skill drove him to obsess over fundamentals. The water book teaches adaptability. Water takes the shape of its container while maintaining its essential nature. Musashi learned to adapt his strategy to each opponent and situation without losing his core principles. This flexibility came from painful experiences of rigidity leading to near defeat. The Fire Book addresses combat itself, the moment of confrontation. Musashi learned to enter this state with complete commitment and clarity, free from hesitation born of fear or regret. Past failures taught him that divided attention in critical moments meant death. The Wind Book examines other schools and approaches. Musashi became successful partly by studying his opponent's methods without attachment, learning what worked and what didn't. This intellectual humility came from recognizing that early certainty about his own correctness was foolish. The Void Book, the shortest and most enigmatic, points to the state beyond technique, what Musashi called the knowing of the spirit. This represents the culmination of his journey, a state where regret, fear, and ego dissolve, and action flows from pure awareness. Practical applications. Musashi's wisdom for modern growth. Musashi's growth secrets translate remarkably well to contemporary challenges, whether in business, creative arts, athletics, or personal development. Practice honest self-inventory. Schedule regular periods for brutally honest self-assessment. What worked? What failed? Where did you get lucky? Where did others fail, allowing you to succeed? This isn't about self-flagellation but about seeing reality clearly. Seek strategic discomfort. Identify areas where you're complacent and deliberately challenge yourself. If you're a public speaker who relies on slides, practice without them. If you're an athlete who trains only your strengths, focus on weaknesses. Growth lives outside comfort. Cross-train your mind. Engage seriously with disciplines outside your primary focus. The connections aren't always obvious, but they enrich your primary practice in unexpected ways. Defend against the tunnel vision that comes from excessive specialization. Create rituals of solitude. Build regular practices of disconnection and reflection. This might be daily meditation, weekly nature walks without phones, or annual solo retreats. Use this time not to plan or produce but to observe yourself and gain clarity. Transform regret into data. When you fail or act in ways you later regret, resist the urge to defend, deny, or wallow. Instead, approach the experience as valuable data. What does this reveal about your current limitations? What needs to change? What can you learn? Focus on process over outcome. Musashi eventually fought not to win but to perfect his understanding of combat. This shift from outcome focus to process focus reduced pressure and improved performance. Apply this to your own domain. Focus on the quality of your practice rather than the results it produces. The ultimate lesson, from warrior to artist. Perhaps Musashi's greatest growth secret is revealed in his final transformation, from warrior to artist. By his later years, he had transcended the need to prove himself through combat. He found the same principles of strategy, timing, and flow in painting, sculpture, and tea ceremony that he had discovered in dueling. This wasn't about becoming less effective as a warrior. It was about recognizing that the principles he had learned transcended their original context. The regrets of his violent youth had led him to wisdom that applied not just to fighting but to all of life. When Musashi died at age 62, he had spent his final years teaching, creating art, and writing. He passed away peacefully in a cave, having lived to see his students carry forward his teachings. The wild, traumatized young man who killed at 13 had become a sage whose wisdom would inspire millions for centuries. His final lesson is perhaps this: our regrets and failures don't define us, how we respond to them does. The pain of past mistakes can become either a prison that constrains us or a forge that tempers us into something stronger and wiser. Musashi chose the forge, and in doing so, transformed himself from a skilled but troubled fighter into a master of not just swordsmanship but of life itself. Conclusion: your own warrior path. You don't need to be a swordsman to apply Musashi's growth secrets. Whether you're building a business, mastering a craft, navigating relationships, or simply trying to become a better person, the principles remain constant. Face yourself honestly, embrace strategic challenge, integrate diverse knowledge, seek clarity in solitude, and transform regret into wisdom. Musashi's journey reminds us that growth is not linear. It's messy, painful, and often requires us to confront our darkest moments. But within those confrontations lies the raw material for genuine transformation. The regrets you carry, the failures you've experienced, the painful lessons you've learned, these aren't obstacles to growth. They're the very substance from which strength is forged. The question isn't whether you have regrets or have made mistakes. Everyone does. The question is whether you'll have the courage to face them honestly, learn from them systematically, and use them as fuel for becoming someone wiser, stronger, and more complete. That's the warrior path Musashi walked, and it remains available to anyone willing to take the first difficult step, looking truthfully at yourself and beginning the work of transformation.